Welcome to It Started With a Kick, the podcast in which well-known fans and high-profile figures in the world of football talk about the first match they ever attended. I'm your host, Richard Foster. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome today Seb White. Seb is the founder and editor-at-large, sounds a bit ominous, editor-at-large at Mundial, which describes itself as the football magazine for those who love the beautiful game. Tick. He's also no stranger to the world of podcasts, co-hosting Mundials, reminding you why you love football, which is a natural partner to this show.
Yeah.
So
I'd like to think so.
We're in a good place, Seb. We're in a good place. So anyway, welcome. And I'm very keen to get into your first match, is because it's held at one of the most famed grounds in British, nay, global football. So let's go there.
No pressure. No, that's good. That's good to know, because I come from a very small town, in a market town in Somerset, and it's called Yeovil. And probably the two things we're famous for, helicopters, and we once had a famous sloping pitch, which caused all sorts of mischief for various football league teams over the years. Most famously Sunderland in 1949. And that is why my first game. I had been before, but the QPR game is the first game I remember just so vividly. There were so many, and I will come on to it, but there were so many reasons why I remember this one. I'd been because I lived just across the road, just across the bridge, and then my school was right opposite the football ground. So I had been before. I'm slightly annoyed that my dad and my granddad didn't mark that specific very, very first game that I went to, technically, but this is definitely the game that gave me a lot, and certainly was the game I pinpoint as the game that started it all, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's where we always like to start. We give guests poetic license, because if you get taken when you're 3 years old, you probably won't have a great deal of memory apart from chucking sweets down your neck.
Well, my dad did say that he used to take me in the pram as well, so and I'm not going to remember that. So technically, we'll you could do that obviously at non-league football back in the day,
of course,
and today, of course.
Well, I mean, I've seen prams go into grounds not necessarily to carry babies, but there we go. We're not gonna veer into that. So it's Saturday, the 9th of December, 1988. So give us a little background to that game, and then let's get into the details of the game itself.
I think the background has to be the stories that my granddad and my dad told me about Yeovil Town in the FA Cup. That was the starting point. That was, we're going back, but to whether it be 1949 with my granddad's, part of the 18,000 throng that saw them beat Sunderland, to all the stories in between, even Arsenal in 1971, the year they won the double, the postponed game at Hewish, and that was one of my dad's probably first big game. But Yeovil lived and breathed FA Cup football because it was such an important part, and statistically we were the team that had beaten the most Football League clubs. So statistically we were the best giant killers. It was a huge badge of honour. We'd always been a non-league football club since our inception back in 1895. We always had these flourishes and flurries of cup runs and excitement and national attention, and of course the famous sloping pitch played a part of that, given that it sloped from one end to the other, or was it one side to the other? I always get this wrong, but it was at least 6 foot either way, so it was substantial, and so that is the key background. I had been going to games, as I said, just a little bit before. My granddad sometimes picked me up, when I was at primary school, which was across the road, literally just across the road. So I'd see it every day. And one reason I ended up going to a couple of evening games, and I remember, or sometimes even looking at the floodlights from my back garden and wishing I was at games. But this was what I was hoping would be my Sunderland moment. My granddad had the Sunderland moment. My dad had, I don't know what his Sunderland moment would have been actually, but there was, the 18, I think, teams by that point we had beaten the Football League wise. So there'd been teams that they'd done well against. And the town was a buzz. It's a small market town. And even as a youngster, I could tell that this was exciting. This was, there were signs everywhere. There were what the FA Cup brings to any place when you see it on obviously Football Focus or whatever. Certainly back then, shop window fronts with green and white bunting and signs in bookmakers. You know, obviously a bit different back in the day when they were almost these secret places that no one under 18 was anywhere allowed anywhere near.
Yeah.
But they had signs everywhere out the front, sort of bet on the big match, so to speak, and. It really was, and I remember that it obviously was completely different walking up to the ground. It was pretty much a sellout. I think it was eight, and I might be wrong. Actually, it might be more than that. It was normally it would be 1,500 to 2,000 Yeovil. It was four, if not five times as much as that. And obviously QPR were a Division One team at the time, and someone who had started to absorb football in a completely different way than people do now, but shoot and Match magazine every week, this was a team that I knew of through that, or even maybe a few little bits on Football Focus or whatever, wasn't obviously quite the same. Didn't always have Match of the Day or football on telly all the time, but QPR, Jim Smith was a storied name. Even I knew that as an 8-year-old. I knew that he was a well-known name. So that's the background. And I just remember going into the ground and thinking, this feels, like I said, this feels proper. This feels like an experience and an occasion. And it very much was. It really was. And like I said, it's the game that I pick as the one I can go back to that place quite easily. And I've been to hundreds of football matches, but certainly that's up there in the memory bank, and one that will always be there.
Mm. And as you say, the slope is something it's known for. I think it would be similar to Lords, wouldn't it? Because Lords got a slope.
Yeah. Oh, well. Yeah.
So Lords and Gish, they're natural
well,
bed partners, aren't they?
I'll take that. I'll take that. And again, a little nugget for those people listening if they didn't quite know. But yeah, this slope was obviously huge and did make a massive difference. But very nearly, when during the Second World War, we had US forces staying, obviously, as they were preparing for D-Day and things like that. The Southwest was full of American forces, and Yeovil was no different. But they were playing baseball on there on a regular basis as to break time, in the downtime or in between training and things. And there was a very serious proposal to level. They'd offered to level the slope back in 1944 and 43, 44. Now, who knows what we might not be sat here talking about. I might not be sat here talking to you about football if that had happened. So yeah, but one of those what if moments for sure. But it was a thing that everyone knew about, and it's still something now that I say to people, Yeovil Town, not just in this country, but sometimes abroad. Someone will go, the pitch, and it's like, we're not there now. That's 20. Yeah, but it's a wonderful thing because no one should know really about the predominantly non-league football team. There's obviously been spells in the Football League more recently, but no one really should know about it. But they do, and that's something that people from Yeovil have great pride about.
I like your war story because that was surely a precursor for American owners coming over here and out with our football.
Yeah.
Come on. You could see it a mile off.
Definitely.
80 years later, we thought, oh gosh, these guys aren't for the best of.
No, exactly. Yeah, we had a dabble with that more recently, actually. One of the better ones, Rob Cohig, who ended up at Wickham, to be fair.
Oh, yeah.
And he was on local news and everything, as if almost he was the next owner, and it just didn't happen for one reason or another. But yeah, a very precursor to American investment in football.
Yes,
but we said no on that occasion.
Well, we should keep saying no. But, anyway. As a Palace fan, I can't really talk about it since we've got a few Americans.
No, fair enough.
But hopefully we're getting rid of one of them to Everton quite soon. Sorry.
Passing him on to someone else.
Yeah, exactly. He's your problem now. So let's look at the game itself. You say, so there's a lot of excitement. Yeovil are playing QPR, and, I like researching these things. So at the time, QPR was 7th in the first division.
Wow, that's God, I hadn't quite realised that. Yeah,
in between Wimbledon and Luton. So,
that's a real late.
That puts it in a certain generation.
It does. That's a real late 80s football Division 1 or whatever it was called then. Yes.
Yeah, and they finished. I think I'm right in saying they finished 5th as the top London club above Arsenal at the end of the. So they were a proper, I mean, they've gone through slightly less salubrious times recently, but they were a big club. They
Yeah.
were established in the first division. Yeovil was sixth in what they called the Vauxhall Opal
Yeah.
Isthmian Premier Division. They always have too many names, I think, non-league
Far
football.
too
I
many.
love
Yeah.
non-league
Yeah.
football, but sometimes they go on
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah. It all gets very confusing even back then. Yeah, I remember it as the GM Vauxhall Conference, which I think it later became only a couple of years later and stuff. But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I
yeah,
mean, the
yeah.
rhyme and what. Anyway, so tier six, I think, in between Wokingham Town and St Albans City. So they're not quite
Mm.
Wimbledon and Luton, but there you go.
No,
You
definitely
know,
not.
but
No, definitely not. And I just remember, yeah, there. I remember, and I mentioned Shoot magazine there.
mm,
In the week or maybe 2 weeks before, there was an article on Yeovil in Shoot magazine, and I was like a double page article, like Yeovil's pipe dream. I think the headline was, with a picture of, I think it was John McGinley, who was, went on to play for Bolton and teams like
mm,
that. But at that stage was a non-league striker, just scoring a couple of goals here and there, not ripping up any trees by any stretch, but not, but someone who became really good. And actually, to be fair to him, he's come back to the club on a number of occasions. But yeah, I remember it was just it was a thing because, like I said, Yeovil were in Shoot magazine.
yeah.
It was, yeah, we shouldn't be in Shoot magazine, and we were. So, FA Cup fever was alive and well.
Absolutely. And, we all are, most people, I think, I'm not going to say our generation, I'm a bit older than you, but most people of the old generation have that fondness for the FA Cup, which, as we know, is now beginning to drift and it's considered a secondary, even a
Yeah,
tertiary
it's
competition because it's all about the Premier
yeah,
League and the Champions League,
yeah.
blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
this
let's
is
not get
going
started
back.
on the replays thing, please.
No,
I'll
no,
get
no.
very upset about
That's a
that.
whole different episode.
Yeah.
It started
That
with a
will not
replay.
remind you why you love football.
No, 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 exactly. So let's look at the game. Actually, when you said the crowd, again, I did the research. It was actually
It wasn't. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
9,717. So almost 10,000, as you
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
Regular
Yeah,
crowds are 1,500. But I
yeah.
will say, and I always do this for my guests, and I don't know whether you've got it, but I
Mm.
have the
I
post.
have got it upstairs in a box.
You've
I
got it.
tried to find it beforehand. Yeah. I've got the only programs I've kept for Yeovil Town are FA Cup programs.
Okay.
Just I think because I obviously had far too many, and I was like, right, I'm going to slim this down a little bit. But yeah, that's one of our iconic covers as well.
It
That
is a
is,
great
yeah,
cover.
I replicated that sort of style for Onto Victory, a fanzine I did later on, just because, and it's quite iconic in Yeovil circles. I could probably put that on the WhatsApp groups that I'm on now, and people would ooh and on WhatsApp because yeah, but yeah, it was. Yeah. And I remember the key thing I remember the most, and yeah, I hope I don't know if this is as interesting as probably what happened in the match, but it's certainly the thing I remember most. We got there early. We certainly got there we got in at like 1:30, which was obviously unheard of. You'd normally just go 5 minutes to,
Mm.
or you'd be in the bar under the main stand or I would be with a bag of crisps and a Coke while my dad was having a few drinks with his mates or my granddad. I remember getting in really early. We got right to the front of the end behind one of the goals or the only goal for Yeovil fans. Just the main stand was to the right. And I remember being there well, yeah, from 1:30 onwards. And I think
Mm.
there's a tea bar. My dad managed to get a Coke or something. And then literally about 10 to 3, 8-year-old Seb was extremely desperate suddenly to go to the toilet. So
Oh.
I lost my hallowed spot. And I do remember my dad being like, we've been stood here for an hour and a half waiting. And fortunately, I managed to come back and sort of get a similar position. But I remember spending most of the first half being annoyed that I'd given up an excellent vantage point, so to speak. But yeah, I just remember it being very muddy.
Mm.
I think the pictures look back now, you can see that. I think there's a famous Yeovil, certainly famous for Yeovil fans, of Tony Ricketts. We had a white with green shorts, and he
Yeah.
is absolutely caked in mud. He's given everything for the cause against, and our QPR were in that very cool red and black hoops.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think the player that stands out for me, and again, for match details, and when you're so young, it was the sights and the sounds and the smells, and I
Hmm.
know it sounds a bit cliche, but it is genuinely true. I because it was so different. I can remember all of that. And then the only player I remember, and I think it was because at the time he was seen as football bad boy, and he was often in Shoot magazine as the football's hard man or whatever, was Mark Dennis.
Yes.
Yes, I think he had a record for like eight, I don't know, more sendings off than most players at the time. And I remember looking out for him. I think Paul Parker was playing for QPR.
Yeah.
Well, I think I probably became more aware of that later when obviously he became an England international a couple of years later at Italia 90. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't I just remember us having the one thing I do remember is we had a really good chance early on, didn't
Mm.
take it, and we were then punished by a more ruthless and more experienced opposition.
Yeah.
And I do remember again, there's two other things I distinctly remember: a bit of a brawl or old school coming together. I think Yeovil were obviously putting the tackle in hard against their more illustrious opponents, and I remember that, and I remember seeing pictures of that afterwards. But the second thing I remember is I saw my first ever streaker. Obviously,
Wow.
Yeovil, obviously the excitement had got to someone at Yeovil, and the way the ground was, you had the stand, and then you had the main stand here, and there was almost like a little gap in the corner, and
Right.
all of a sudden, and there was a couple of people on the roof of this little hut thing that was next to the main stand, and I
Mm.
just remember all of a sudden everyone laughing, and then looking at this. Well, there was someone with no clothes, and
Right.
I'd never seen that before. There's no reason why I would. I was 8 years old, and I just remember the streaker running onto the pitch, the police chasing them and not
Yeah.
quite getting them, and everyone cheering, and you know, that's the thing I still remember, vividly because it's just such a well, I'd never seen anything like it. I'd never seen 10,000, nearly 10,000 people there. I'd never seen a streaker at a football pitch, and yeah, I think it was almost like, well, okay, I haven't had my Sunderland moment in terms of results, but I've had my granddad watched the Sunderland game on beer crates outside the ground because even though he had a ticket, he couldn't get in. He was queuing
Right.
for whatever. So and it felt like I had that moment. And like I said, I'm still talking about it, however many years on, God knows how many years is it? 37, 36. Oh
It's
God.
36. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But
Sorry.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like I said, it's a moment I can vividly remember, and amongst all the matches that I've been to all around the world, not just watching Yeovil, but in my job and stuff. And it's just, yeah, it's up there as a real a real main point of my football journey. Certainly the start of it.
Yeah. So I must admit, being a streaker in January, early January, and
Yeah,
I haven't checked the seasonal temperatures, but I bet it
no,
was a bit chilly.
no, it was very yeah, yeah, and I think, and this was the thing, and again, this sounds like I had to check this because it
Yeah.
keeps obviously I've worked in football pretty much all my life and read
Yeah.
all sorts of things, and sometimes I have to remember like, did this actually happen? And especially in Yeovil, there was a special version of the whatever the pink and or the green and was at the
Oh yeah,
time,
yeah,
but
yeah,
we
yeah.
never obviously had that on a Saturday normally. I
No.
think it might have been like the Bristol Evening Post or something had done a special one. So by
Right.
the time we got home, was staying at my dad's who lived a bit further out into Yeovil. We went round to the newsagents and got a version of the Bristol Evening Post, pink and or green and
Yeah.
whatever it's called. I must try and find one actually. That's next on
Yeah.
my eBay list. But I remember there being a picture of the policeman with the streaker who was like covered in mud from behind. And I
Yeah.
remember, but buying a newspaper, which again seems crazy, 36 years on, that you would get a newspaper. It sounds
Yeah.
incredible, just to actually turn it around.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, I remember at 5:45 we were at the shop and we were reading about it because it was a big thing. It was the big match. It was a huge thing, and I remember having that, and yeah, like I said, I probably should try and dig that out if I have. It might be in one of my boxes, but if not, find another version of it because it was yeah. And then life really, football wise, I would say to return to normal a little bit, but not too much to normal because it wasn't that long after we were saying goodbye to that stadium that I
Yeah.
sort of yeah. But that was definitely a switch. Even though I had been to games before, that was I want to go to football all the time now. Like I want
Mm.
to go.
That's
Can I go next Tuesday? My mum going, you've got school the next day. It's like, yeah, yeah, but granddad's yeah. Okay, maybe, yeah. So I wasn't standing in the garden looking forlornly at floodlights. I was there and yeah. So that it was definitely the catalyst for yeah, going on a much more regular basis. And
Yeah. And that's, as you say, you got the connection then because you could have been
Mm,
taken, you were taken when you're a bit younger, but you can't, when you're a little bit younger than that, you can't really
mm.
take it in, and you're totally reliant, obviously, on
Yeah,
someone.
yeah, definitely.
When
Yeah,
you're
definitely.
three, you're not going to turn up at the turnstile and go,
No,
"And if I come in here,
no, no.
I'm
Back,
under
yeah,
18." I think
yeah,
I
yeah,
justify a youth ticket.
yeah,
Um, so again, going through the instance, because as I say, I did dig out
yeah.
the YouTube
It's
version of
it's
this
a it's a
game.
great clip, isn't it?
It is great,
Because it
and
was on match. It was on Match of the Day that night, wasn't it? Because of the
correct,
FA Cup.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I think it's Martin Tyler. I'm
I,
sure it's Martin Tyler who's
yeah. I think it
commentating.
is. Yeah,
And as you
yeah,
say, there were a couple of misses.
yeah,
Um, and there was a guy, I mean, you
but
mentioned John McGinley, who'd obviously starting his career
yeah,
and
yeah,
went
yeah,
on to become
yeah,
pretty well known at the
yeah, definitely.
Bolton and a Scottish
Yeah,
international.
yeah,
But there
definitely.
was someone at the other end of his career, Paul Randall,
Yes, yeah. I was good. I was
who
waiting.
Bristol Rovers fans will laud to the heights
Yeah,
because he was a very
yeah.
successful striker. I remember, I can't really remember if I ever saw him play, but I remember Paul Randall as a Bristol
Mm.
Rovers, talisman. He was a great
Yeah,
striker.
yeah.
But he actually missed a
That's it.
one-on-one with the
That's it.
keeper,
Yeah,
which even Martin Tyler's a bit disappointed in. He says,
yeah,
"Oh,
yeah, yeah,
normally Randall would have put that away," and it just feels like that was the moment. I think it might have been 1-0 at the time to QPR. But if you'd have got
yeah,
that, then it could have turned around. And let's face it, Randall had actually played in the first division with Stoke.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. He was very good strike. He was a very good striker, and someone instantly that you would certainly remember. I remember him being even at a young age, being a good goal scorer.
yeah,
Someone who was, and again, I think when you live in Yeovil, a little, you're 45 minutes drive to Bristol, but Bristol City and Bristol Rovers seem like these huge football clubs, and they were,
yeah, yeah,
Bristol
yeah.
City obviously were. Um, I think they were in Division One in the '70s, weren't they?
Mm.
Either
Yeah,
way,
they were.
Bristol they were a big football club. Bristol Rovers as well, stories and so when we had players, which we often would because of the distance from those clubs, it would be like, oh, they must be good. They're playing for, they're playing
Yeah,
because the nearest Division One team was Southampton, and that's still like an hour and a half, maybe a little, yeah, an hour and a half away. So it's Bristol Rovers and Bristol. Bristol was the big city
yeah.
for us bumpkins, so to speak. But yeah, when we got players from that neck of the woods, Jerry Gow and people like that were
Yeah, I
I
remember
was
him.
was even manager a little bit before my time, I think. But yeah, we it was a big thing for us, even though because we were quite a big. My dad used to say it to me quite a lot, and it might be because of his Manchester United background, but he did say that we were like the Manchester United of non-league because of the FA Cup history.
Yeah.
We had bigger crowds than pretty much most teams.
Mm.
We were this, we were never quite good enough to, well, there wasn't promotion and relegation then, but we were always on the cusp of re-election or not
Yeah.
re-election, election to the league.
Election.
I've got like loads of brochures from the '70s of elect Yeovil to the Football League and stuff like this. And in there, invariably, I think it was always a bit of a northern cabal, wasn't it? Up with like Wigan and teams like that getting in because I think a lot of
Yeah.
the clubs were based up north. It was, easier for them to go there than the Oval. But yeah, it was interesting, but we knew our place. We certainly knew, and I think we enjoyed being a non-league club, playing
Mm.
against football league clubs and being feared. Whether that was a lot to do with the pitch or not, it was still a thing that people talked about, but were also concerned about.
Yeah. And Tyler, in his commentary, does the classic. This is what they do in their day job. So there's a guy called
Oh yeah,
Sherwood
yeah.
who worked for the Ministry of Defence.
Jeff Sherwood, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And then apparently your man Rutter was a policeman, as was Wallace. So you had two policemen. Maybe they were the
Sti
ones chasing the
yeah.
streaker. I don't know.
They
But
might have been, yes. Steve Rutter and Andy Wallace are
yeah,
very, very big names in Yeovil folklore for different
right,
FA Cup reasons. Steve
right.
Rutter was manager when we later went on to beat Hereford and then played Arsenal. And Andy Wallace was the goal scorer against Fulham in a famous early FA Cup game that was live on Sky on a Monday night
Wow.
in the early 90s. So yeah, police. I didn't know they were policemen actually. Yeah, Steve Rutter ended up doing very, very well coaching wise with the FA. He's quite high up in the FA, or he was.
Okay.
But yeah, good names, and good.
Good. It was Rutter is a good name for a
Yeah,
sub,
good name. It is a
just
good
as a
name. Yeah,
name.
yeah,
I
yeah,
hope
yeah.
he was quite an aggressive midfield player who
Who Rutter?
rutted.
No, no. He was.
Oh,
Actually a very stylish centre back.
oh,
Yeah. Don't
well,
get me.
like a Paolo Maldini type,
More centre defender, but
more
more.
central.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. But also
okay,
you had.
Baresi.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. A little bit, but maybe obviously any non-league footballer at that time would have to be pretty sturdy
Yes,
if you're
yes,
coming up against the John McGinleys and the
yeah,
Paul Randalls of this world.
indeed.
Yeah.
Um, so let's look at the game itself. So I say you managed to. It was 0-0 up to the 45th minute
Mm,
when Mark Falco scored,
that's right. Yeah.
and then he followed it up annoyingly with another goal in the 79th, and then Brock finished it off in the 84th. But if you look at this QPR team, I mean, we've already spoken about it, the fact that they were quite high up in the first division,
Mm.
ended up the top London
Fifth.
club.
Yeah, yeah.
They had, I mean, they had Nicky Johns in goal because Seaman was actually there, but he was injured or wasn't
Mm,
playing, certainly. Your man, Mark Dennis, who has actually
yeah.
been mentioned on this podcast before for being terrifying.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
as a Palace fan, I remember his brief spell with us, and I was terrified. And he was playing for
God, yeah, he was that. Yeah.
yeah,
Southampton as well. He played for, didn't he?
yeah,
I think.
Southampton. That was
Yeah,
the
yeah.
game. I think
The
someone
Hummel
talked
kit,
about.
and I can pick 80s sort of long blondish hair,
Oh
didn't he? And
yes,
yeah,
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 yeah, yeah. Very, very
yeah.
sort of. I'm trying to think of a pop star. Lamal. No, that's a bit.
Yeah, like
But
yeah, yeah,
lots of
yeah.
hair, basically.
He looked like he could be on top of the pops, but he also looked like he could dish out a thrashing post, outside the
Absolutely.
nightclub after the gig.
Yeah, yeah, that sort of stuff. And as you say, Paul Parker, who 18
Yeah,
months later had swapped Hirsch for,
mm,
Italia 90. He was
yeah,
in, the famously
yeah,
semi-final when it flicked off his head and went past Chilton. And
yeah,
Alan McDonald's a great player.
yeah,
Martin Allen was playing. Gary, I mean, this is an incredible. So the fact that Yeovil, okay, you lost 3-0, but you
yeah,
took them on, and they were not
yeah.
comfortable. So
No, 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 and I remember watching it. I did. Yeah, I remember watching it. Every again, it's one of those things that crops up on this day or on the WhatsApp group. Oh, and I remember watching it fairly recently again, and it's yeah, I remember us thinking, oh, we went a million miles away, and that became a bit of a thing. We'd always give it a bloody good go,
mm,
even to the moving forward to 2004 when we played Liverpool at home in front of the match of the day. It was live on BBC, and
yeah,
for the first half, I remember Peter Schmeichel and Anna Hansen going, these are the better team against Liverpool. And we were just like,
well,
and then obviously class eventually does usually tell as it should do, but
yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's, yeah, again, it's the FA Cup moments, like the whole history is potted with different moments, even history before my granddad was born, in the early
mm,
30s, we played Sheffield Wednesday, Liverpool and teams like that. And it's just a constant thing throughout, Yeovil Town's history, the FA Cup. It really is. And it's just and actually, when we became a Football League club, we saw the other side of that because we had a few giant killings against us,
yes.
you
Well, it does
become,
come back to bite you
it
sometimes,
does. Yeah.
doesn't it?
Yeah. But then you understood it. It was like, well, okay, fine. We've been there plenty of times and
Yeah.
yeah, let them enjoy it. But yeah, Mark Falco. Yes. Tottenham. Did he end up at Tottenham or was he
Yeah,
there at Tottenham
yeah.
before or whatever? Yeah. But
I think
maybe
he went to
before.
Tottenham, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But you talk about giant killing. Now, I love looking through programs. In
Yeah.
this program, they've actually put down your
Yeah. Yeah.
record
Yeah.
against league clubs because you say,
Yeah.
you're a non-league club up to this point.
Yeah.
I'm ashamed to say Palace are in here twice.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
You
Early
beat us,
1960?
well, you beat us in 1934-35, which I don't blame you for not remembering.
Yeah.
In the first round, he beat us 3-0.
Yeah.
And we were a
Yeah.
Division 3 South side. And then, yeah, you're right. In 1963-64,
63, yeah.
we were in Division 3. This was the
Yeah.
second round. You bloody beat us 3-1. So I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm not
Yeah.
having Yeovil crowing over I can't remember any other times we played you. So
No, I don't
I
think
think
we
you have a
ever.
100% record against us, which is a sorry.
Yeah. I mean, the Crystal Palace Yeovil connection, he may well have been at Crystal Palace
Oh,
at
of
this
course,
time, was
Pardew.
Alan Pardew.
Yeah.
Yeah, who had been at us and ended up being signed by Palace. And obviously again, talking about FA Cup and links, but I remember watching Palace v Liverpool
Yes.
in that semi-final and
Yes.
distinctly going, like my dad going, he used to play for you know, like when Pardew scored, it was like,
Yeah.
God, it's the, you know, and it was those things that you were like, yeah, obviously he wasn't at Yeovil very long, actually, to be honest. He played a lot of his, I think he was at Dulwich beforehand, but these little things and these little memories and these little links in football, yeah, I think that's what half makes it such a great game.
Yeah. Well, I remember we bought him for 7,000 from you.
Yeah.
£7,000, which was probably quite a useful amount of money for
Well,
you.
there's a story behind that because
Oh,
we were, and I think it's very much out in the open and it's no secret. And it was a long time ago, so hopefully everyone is okay with what happened. But because we bought it from Dulwich,
yeah.
we owed there was a set percentage sell on or something like that due,
Mhm.
and I think the fee that we actually received for Alan Pardew was allegedly a lot less than, or less than it should be. And the remaining monies was made up with someone from the West London area buying a number of golden draw lucky golden gamble tickets or
Yeah. Yeah.
draw tickets for the remainder of the season. It was highly inflated. Our draw that, like sort of club draw that we ran,
Okay.
there was a lot of entries, and there was from a certain place in London, which may
London.
have made up the difference. So yeah, which
Okay. Well, you
yeah,
were probably dealing with Ron Nodes, which he's
yes, yeah, yeah.
proudly
Now it
departed,
makes
but I would
sense.
never say
No,
he's in the most honourable
no,
chairman.
yeah, it
And let's face it, that's quite a low bar.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
Now it makes complete sense. Of course, it would have been. Yeah, yes. But yeah. Anyway, that is a little yeah. Something I like to remind even the Dulwich fans that I know to this day. Yeah, a little bit of football trivia and nonsense. But yeah,
yeah. And just going back to this great history of giant killing, you say
yeah,
Yeovil, they have the record, don't they, for beating the most
yeah.
league
Even then, I
teams
think
as a
yeah,
non-league
we
club.
beat a few early '90s, and then obviously we
Mm,
became a football league club. But I think we got up to 20. I think we might have been 17, 18 around this
yeah,
time.
which is a
Um,
record, and I
which
don't
is the
think you
record.
would
Yeah,
beat
yeah,
that.
and and it's
Um,
something we like to boast about because whenever anyone talks about FA Cup, inevitably Ronnie Radford is featured, and of
of
course it's a
course,
wonderful goal.
yeah.
But yeah, we are still statistically the most successful giant killers.
And no
Statistically,
one can argue with stats.
no one can argue with that. I know
No
back in
one.
non-league we might yeah, we can we I don't know if we've added to it since we've been back in non-league, but yeah, yeah.
Well,
I'd
that's
have to.
probably why you went back to non-league because you thought, "Oh,
Yeah,
this league
yeah.
stuff's pretty dull, and we want to add
Yeah,
to our
yeah,
giant killing
yeah,
record." So,
yeah,
which is
yeah.
fair
That's
enough.
an altogether new and different podcast. Actually, I did do a podcast about the history of my history of Yeovil Town for a
Right.
series called Giant that we did for Spotify. And
Oh
if
yeah.
anyone wants to hear even more about Yeovil Town and my relationship with them, then look at my Yeovil Town, my granddad, my dad, and me. And it's basically our stories of
Right.
the club from 1948 to the present day. But yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll.
It's only 25 minutes, so yeah, don't worry, it's not too long. But yeah, I like doing it because it did well, it went across all the generations, and I ended up
Mm.
talking about my daughter who's now 12, who actually we went to our first Yeovil game or she went to her first Yeovil game last year.
Oh right.
Yeah, so
Well, that's
it's
one of
come
my
full
follow-up
circle.
questions. That is one of
Sorry, yeah,
my
I'm getting
follow-up
ahead. I'm
questions.
getting
No,
ahead
don't worry. We
as
like
an
leaping ahead, and then we have to leap back
yeah,
again.
as an interviewer, I should know better.
No, 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 no. I'm not too prescriptive about what we do and when we do it. But if we could wait just a little bit longer to get to that one.
Yeah, sorry, yeah,
No,
you're
no, no,
talking about
no.
this really good program.
So, and I will certainly be listening to that, your Yeovil Town stuff because it is quite a history, and we will go through that as well in a
Mm,
little bit. Back to the game.
mm.
You will not remember this. I'm going to guarantee it. The referee is someone who immediately struck me. I went, oh, some referees
Yeah, yeah,
go, oh, I recognise that guy.
yeah.
Now, he was from Torquay, so obviously local,
Local, yeah, yeah.
roughly.
Maybe too local, but maybe not, I suppose. Yeah.
He'd been the longest serving Football League referee. He'd been there for 17 years. And
Mm.
importantly, he was also a copper. So I'm
Oh,
thinking, he
yeah,
was
yeah,
probably
yeah.
quite nice to Rutter and Wallace.
Yeah, yeah,
Going,
that's true. Yeah. You'd
you
like to
know,
think so, wouldn't you?
the old
I'd like to see.
Freemason's
Yeah,
elbow.
yeah,
Oh, that's right.
yeah.
I, this guy's just got chopped down at the knees. Oh, he's fine. He's a
Yeah, yeah,
policeman.
yeah.
It's okay. It's all above board. His name, okay, and
Go on.
white hair,
Yeah.
Les Shapter.
No, don't. Yeah, that
No,
is before my time.
I know it
Before
is.
my
I know it
time.
is. But
Yeah, but
for us
yeah, not even
oldies,
in the
he was
annals of.
very familiar and very recognizable.
Yeah, no, I don't know. No.
Check him out on the video.
Yeah, yeah,
He's just got this massive. I don't know if he was always had white hair, but he
yeah,
definitely had
yeah.
it, and it always looked good because referees didn't wear plum or
No, no, no,
they
no.
wore black.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
white hair,
White
black
hair.
kit,
Yeah,
brilliant.
yeah, and back then as well, obviously referees, like you said, being a policeman, and they probably and the fact that you said he's from Torquay, they don't do that anymore, do they? Referees so
No,
and
no,
so
no,
from,
no, no.
yeah, yeah. It's one of those things very much of its time.
Yeah. Well, they used to put. I remember in programs they used to put where they were from
Yeah,
in brackets. They
yeah,
don't
exactly.
do
Yeah,
that anymore. So
yeah,
you
yeah,
think,
exactly.
hang on a minute, he's from the
Yeah, yeah,
same county. He's going to be there. He's going to be biased.
yeah.
Well, it's not the same county. Devon's.
No, no, exactly. It is. Yeah, it's one of those funny football things. Yeah,
Yeah.
we must let people know where these referees are from. Um, yeah, maybe that started it all. I don't know. Maybe some of the anti-referee feeling. I don't know, but
Well,
what a strange thing. Yeah, now you think about it, it's very strange.
yeah, and all these things, and I'm sure people used to track them down.
Yeah,
Right, I've come to Torquay. Where's the chapter gone?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Now you took because we talked about the crowd, and again,
yeah,
I love this in the program. And your manager was called Brian Hall, not the Brian
yes,
Hall that played for Liverpool. I like the fact that his program notes. This is very good. On the ball with Brian Hall.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Come
yeah, yeah.
on,
I remember. Yeah, I
you
remember.
can't
Yeah,
beat that. But
yeah, yeah,
I love the fact in here, he welcomes QPR, Jim Smith, and all this sort of stuff. He says, I also wish to welcome the 5,500 or so non-regular Yeovil
yes,
customers here
none. Yeah.
today, and hope this game alone will encourage you to support your local club on a regular basis. I shall assume that from now on you will all be here with us, from 1,500
Yeah.
to 9,770, as one big family town. But if you're not going to be here, I shall expect a letter from you telling me why. Brilliant.
Oh,
Our
Christ.
local postman, our local postman is a
Yeah.
personal friend of mine, and he has a very bad back. It's much easier and more humane for you to keep turning up regularly for the sake of not buying one packet of cigarettes or drinking 2 pints during the week. You could come here and not only enjoy it, but also be healthier. I mean,
That's
as a
great,
call
isn't
to
it?
arms, that is classy.
Yeah.
That is
He
classy.
was, yeah, it's funny enough on the Facebook group recently, which is called the Yeovil Town Heritage Society, which is
Okay.
great and has like real nuggets and things that you completely forgot. But they had him down as the man, Brian Hall, the man that people love to hate.
Oh,
He had two spells at Yeovil. The first one was much more successful. The second one ended pretty badly, but to be fair, he was dealt in a very unfair hand because the subsequent ground move had caused financial issues. But
yeah.
he was certainly an eccentric. Even I remembered that. And I think what you've just said there from the program notes is,
Mm-hmm.
because they are certainly now having read a number of programs and they're not the most, you're not going to get much insight from them, are you? Or not much fun.
No.
And so, yeah, that showed. Did you know, actually, as soon as you said Brian Hall, and we've mentioned him a few times, he was a trainer at the Met Police.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, yeah,
Hang
yeah,
on a minute.
yeah, yeah.
There's
There's a
something going
real,
on here.
there's a real, there's a
Wow.
real police influence. And maybe the streaker was I don't know, maybe he was part of the training session, but it was, yeah, I remember. Yeah, you say that it wasn't the butchers, the bakers, the candlestick makers, that like the cliched lines and
No.
stuff. It was, yes, police. Now you say that, yeah. Andy Wallace, Rutter, Jeff Sherwood was in the services, obviously being near
Yeah.
Yeovil and Yeovilton base. We
Yeah.
had people like Guy Whittingham subsequently. I think Tivlo was in the Marines. So yeah, there was an authoritative air around Yeovil Town
Mm.
for a number of years.
Yeah,
Um,
well, I think we'll just leave it there.
yeah,
The listeners, the viewers can make their own mind up about what this
yeah.
led to. Yeah, I get. I'm not here to judge. I'm just
No,
here to
no,
present the facts.
no.
So, the, the pitch was the slope. You
Mm.
said it was awfully muddy. Now, as I said to you before we did this, it's interesting that Jim White, the QPR, Jim Smith, sorry,
Yeah,
Jim
yeah.
Smith, the QPR manager. Let's face it, QPR had a plastic pitch at this point, and
Oh God, they did, didn't they?
they must have
Yes.
thought, hang on a minute, we're playing on a mud heap. It's got a slope. There's
Oh,
everything's wrong with it.
a real leveler, an actual leveler. You know, you hear that term a lot, don't you? But genuinely, now you've just met.
Leveler is yeah,
Do you know
literally
what?
that.
Ironically, but you actually, as you mentioned that, yes, they did. They would have
Yeah.
gone from that to, yeah, crikey.
So what Jim Smith did, and this is quite impressive, is he actually
Mm,
took QPR to Cornwall
mm.
to practice on St Austell's pitch, which I don't know if you knew this. Apparently, it's
Yeah.
got an even bigger slope than the
An
Huge
even bigger
and
slope.
Lords. I don't know. I
Wow.
mean, these three things are connected clearly.
Yeah, yeah,
Have you
yeah.
ever been to St? I've been to St Austell. I've
I've
never
been to
been.
St Austell, but yeah, I've never been
Have you
to the
been to the football
ground.
ground?
No.
No.
But I'd say he's missed a trick there because
Oh,
there's a place called Chard, which is
oh, I know
about
Chard. Yeah.
20 minutes away from Yeovil. And that
Hmm.
has got a very, very slopey pitch. So it would
Oh,
have saved on petrol and that. But maybe it was slightly, yeah, for whatever reason. But in fact, I think it might be entering its final season. I think they're moving. But yeah,
yeah.
it's, I think even, so I did back in whichever anniversary it was for 2008. So 1948, 49.
Hmm.
50, 60 years on. Can't remember. My brain's fuzzy. I did a commemorative magazine called Slope and Glory.
Nice.
And even back then, 1948, 49, people were trying to get past or trying to get used to the slope, and they were doing things like that, going and training at,
Yeah.
even like the Sunderland team. I can't remember what they did now. They did something, or they tried to do something to prepare themselves for what was, a genuine, or not, dare I say, leveler, but it was definitely something that made a difference. And it's, yeah, it's a piece of folklore, but it's also it genuinely must have done something. We couldn't have, I think 18, 19, 20 teams, or 18 teams, certainly more at that ground, beaten, and the majority of them at home. It must
Yeah.
have been a real daunting prospect for
Exactly.
opposition players, even lofty ones like first division ones from Sunderland in 48 or 49. And certainly the first half of the QPR game, but they
Mm.
obviously got used to it second half.
Yeah. And anyway, so Jim Smith, having
Mm,
worked out, as you say, this
yeah,
is going to be tough. There might be a non-league side, but they've, a lot of giant killing.
yeah,
Sunderland 48, 49, Palace twice. So that must
yeah,
have been
yeah,
ringing
yeah,
around
yeah,
his head. Um,
yeah.
they went on to play Truro Town in a friendly at St Austell's pitch. And they won 8-0. So they
Right, so they really did get you.
got into
Yeah,
the swing of
Christ.
it. Muddy,
Yeah,
slopey, windy, wet.
yeah, yeah,
Beat Truro Town. So you did better than Truro Town.
yeah,
Uh,
true. We'll take that.
yeah,
We'll
yeah, it's
take
all
that.
good. One thing I want to pick up with you about giant killing
Mm.
is the 48, 49 legend Sunderland. Do you know what happened in the next round, Seb, to Yeovil?
The
Because you
match,
actually played
yeah.
Man United,
We
didn't you?
played Man United in front of a tremendously big crowd at Main Road because they were playing there because of bomb damage. Yeah, we got absolutely stuffed by
You
Man
got
United. Was it 8-0?
it was 8-0.
It
Yeah.
was 8-0,
A
yeah,
bit
absolutely
like
stuffed.
QPR beating Truro
Yeah,
Town.
yeah, exactly. We got absolutely stuffed. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
again, it was something that even I knew as a kid. Not that we just played Man United, but I think
Yeah.
the crowd would have been, at that point, the largest crowd or FA Cup crowd outside of Wembley or something like that. It was,
Mm.
I can, it was 83,000, but little things like it was that popular that they even did. There was I don't know if you've heard this before, but there was a thing of the time where sometimes on entrepreneurs, local entrepreneurs would do unofficial match program, so to speak.
Oh, okay.
And the actual unofficial match program from the Man United game is worth a lot more than the official match program from the Man United game, given the scarcity of it. But
Yeah.
yeah, little things like that. And there's Pathé news clips. And again, just to give you the context, the fact that Yeovil were being featured on Pathé News, a little market town from Somerset,
Yeah.
some amazing clips of like pre-match and stuff during the week as well. It was, yeah, it's a lovely thing to go and watch, even if you're not a Yeovil Town fan. It's really of its time, and yeah, it was obviously a great moment. And the hero, funny enough, I bought this is very week, I was on eBay and I've
Uh-huh.
been looking for have you ever seen, these commemorative post or commemorative post
No.
envelopes, whatever? Well, I don't actually know what they are. Yeah, basically that they were very much of the 80s, 70s, 80s, and they would post things
Right.
on a special occasion. So this was on the last day of Hewish, which was
Okay.
18 months onwards, but it's signed
Yeah.
by 8 of the players from 1948.
What happened to the other
Uh,
three?
I think they may have passed by then, or they weren't
Oh,
around
okay.
to sign it.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. Right.
They signed 3,500 of these. And
What?
these are old men by this stage. So we've got Alex Stock, Eric Bryant. And
Yeah.
not only did they sign their names, they signed their positions. So, or Alex Stock manager, Bob Keaton, right half, Ralph Harris, left back. And they had to do that 3,500 times.
My God. So they didn't have
That
digital
must have
autographs
taken,
then, did they?
no, no,
You
no,
couldn't have
no,
done that and just
no.
put it in. So they had to do that. Is amazing. Wow.
Yeah,
They must have got writer's cramp.
yeah,
Now you mentioned Alex Stock there.
yes.
Now he also has quite a big part of the program here because he was not only a Yeovil
Oh, yeah.
connection, but he
No.
was also a QPR connection. But
Mm.
he was manager
He was
of the
player manager.
famous the Sunderland Giant
Yeah,
connection, wasn't he?
player
But he
manager.
played for you for
Yeah.
the 3 years before after the war. Is that right?
Yeah, he did. He did. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because he was a Somerset boy. He was born
Right.
up near more North Somerset, I
Yeah.
think. Um, but yeah, he was. And actually, I don't think player managers were much of a thing then. But he became
No.
player manager of Yeovil. Scored one of the goals in the 2-1 win against Sunderland.
Okay.
Obviously went on to incredible things.
Yeah.
Someone that probably, if you have. Probably the all-time legend at Yeovil Town, I think.
Hmm.
There's a picture of him up on the stairs in the hallway of him in his boots at his desk in the week up running up to the Sunderland game. But someone who I was always told stories about, someone who was respected within the wider game. Like you said, QPR, Fulham, ended
Hmm.
up managing Roma for a bit, didn't he, as well? Things
Yeah.
like that, and obviously became the caricature for the Fast Show character as well, which yeah, very nice, tongue in cheek and quite funny. But
Yeah.
um, he was someone that was still even then a presence around Yeovil and would turn up for the big games. I remember him turning up to our new stadium to open or to turn on the scoreboard. I say
Hmm.
scoreboard. It was one of those quite old school ones that
Yeah.
didn't probably merit an official unveiling by someone like that. But yeah, we had the Alex Stock testimonial not that long after it as
Hmm.
well. Yeah, an amazing football man who, yeah, Yeovil fans will always have a soft spot, even if you obviously weren't around at the time. You only have to read a few books and the like to see that he was a legend of the game and legend of Yeovil.
Yeah, one of those grandees. So
Mm,
he did so many things, and I think I suppose especially in those days, everyone respected him, and everyone said, "Right,
mm,
he's a proper football man,"
mm,
And then you can move into the Bobby Robsons, etc. And now it
exactly.
gets
Yeah.
more difficult because of the massive exposure, and but
Yeah.
I think he bestrode the game. Could we say that?
Yeah. Yeah. I
And
think
because
something like that. Yeah. But we played QPR when we played QPR in the Championship, I think we played them in League One. But when we were in the Championship at Loftus Road, I think they did. They called it like the Alex Stock Day, and the program had Alex Stock on the cover and stuff like that. And it was like, as with all football clubs, you always want to claim someone as your own, don't you?
of
But
course.
I think it's nice the fact that QPR fans like that, and Fulham fans he took them to the cup final, didn't he? Fulham,
Yeah, well, he took
yeah,
QPR up to Division One.
Yeah,
So
exactly. So
he was their manager for 8 or 9 years in the city.
yeah. So someone who's revered by not just one club or become a
Yeah,
club legend. It's all yeah.
exactly.
And yeah, he must have been at the game against QPR. I'm sure he would
I
have
think, yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I think in the
Yeah.
program he says he's going to be there.
Yeah, yeah, he
That's
must
quite
yeah.
a, because he talks
Yeah.
about both sides and how
Yeah, of course, yeah.
his involvement.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a great man. Um, and you mentioned there, you slipped it in very cleverly when Yeovil were in the Championship, because some people were going,
Yeah.
hang on a minute,
I know,
second
yeah, yeah.
tier of English football?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So can we just touch on from, this is your starting point,
Yeah.
and non-league club always had. Can we just have a quick
Yeah.
look at the rise of Yeovil Town?
Yeah, yeah.
Because
Well,
I'm sure
yeah,
you'll love
exactly.
doing this, but
No, 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 no. Well, I do, but it doesn't start off particularly great. It's almost
no,
a rise from the depths, Phoenix from the flames, like because so the ground that we've been talking about, Hewish,
yeah,
the original ground, the original sloping pitch.
yeah,
Before most clubs started doing it, and I think we moved in the same year as Scunthorpe did, or I think we're the first team to have the purpose-built stadium for, or first football league team to have a purpose-built stadium in 1990 or
yeah,
91. I can never quite. Anyway, because it was a prime town centre location, Tesco's offered us loads of money for our historic football ground. Obviously, the money was attractive and we could find a site out of town or out on the outskirts of town
right,
and to build a brand new stadium. And I remember going up to watch it like, I know this is probably people thinking, well, there's obviously not much to do in Yeovil, but me and my granddad and my dad quite often on a Sunday would walk up to the ground and see it sort of taking shape, the new ground.
right,
Anyway, let's just say the ownership of the time didn't quite get their sums right, and it left us in a very precarious position immediately after we moved into this all singing, all dancing new stadium.
yeah,
And it was actually the FA Cup that arguably saved Yeovil Town from going out of existence.
okay,
We drew with Hereford in a second round game.
hmm,
We had a replay, but in the meantime, the draw had been made for the third round, and the winners were to get Arsenal at home. Now, obviously,
wow,
um, that is a very big, attractive proposition, but certainly attractive proposition for a club that is
yeah,
in very serious financial trouble.
right,
We historically and famously won, certainly amongst Yeovil fans, the night at Edgar Street. Neil Coates, who scored the goal, who was a local lad,
hmm,
legend forevermore, scored the winner, and we played Arsenal. And we obviously had 8,000 there.
yeah,
It was recorded live and then replayed at like 5:30 as well on the Saturday. It was quite weird.
right,
Ian Wright scored a hat trick, probably very similar to the QPR game. We scored a penalty in that one, so it was 3-1, but we
right,
were always behind. Um, so anyway, Yeovil doesn't go out of existence.
yeah,
We plod around non-league. We even get relegated to the ISIS League.
yeah,
I know people that go, "What, the ISIS League?" There was a league called the ISIS League, and it had
yes,
nothing to do, obviously, with what became.
no. They were
But
also
yeah,
ISIS was used as Swindon Town sponsors. I had David Squires,
yeah,
uh,
yes, yes,
and he said
yeah.
he pointed out the sponsor's called ISIS. He said not to be confused
Not to be
with the
confused with the
terrorist
radical.
organisation. But
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
obviously getting maybe his connection to this police thing.
yeah.
Ah, Cluzo. We know we're on it now.
And then exactly, and then so we don't go out of existence. We
No.
mess around non-league, and then we employ. We nearly get promoted one year. Russian Diamonds Pippers at the last after being ahead for so long. Colin Addison, another famous football man, didn't quite take us up. We
Okay.
replaced him with a man called Gary Johnson, who had
Yeah.
previously been manager of Latvia. Gary Johnson, Sir Gary Johnson, Lord Gary Johnson, whatever you want to call him, legend. For not just one but two successful spells at the football
Yes.
club, took us into the football league. That team that took us into the football league, we had like 101 points, probably the best team that I've ever seen as
Hmm.
a team. Even though we obviously had better players later on, best team. Uh, we get into League One fairly quickly, second season, and then we consolidate in League One for a good 7, 8 years.
Yeah.
And then Gary Johnson returns from after being manager of Bristol City. Um, and nearly taken them to the Premier League.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he didn't. But he comes to the Oval and performs a miracle again.
Mm.
by taking a fairly favourites relegation, a fairly average squad into the playoffs where we beat Sheffield United in the semi-final, including Harry Maguire and people like that.
Yeah.
Um, and then we beat Brentford in the final, which, is fair to say we won the battle that day, but they've certainly won a war.
Yes. Well, you look long term. I was actually at that game. I was
Yeah,
at the Yeovil Brentford game because I was beginning
yeah,
to research my book, The
your,
Agony and the Ecstasy, the history of the
of
Football League
course, yeah,
playoffs.
yeah,
And I was the first time the Football League actually invited me to go and watch something. And I
yeah.
do remember that because I remember Paddy Madden
Paddy Madden, yeah.
scored for you.
Again, a legend in a still. And to be fair, he seems to be a legend at most clubs he goes to. His work rate, his his knack for scoring great goals and many
Yeah.
goals. Particularly that day, yeah.
Still going, isn't he? I think
He's
he's
still
still.
going. He's at Chesterfield now, I think, who are in League Two. So he went from Stockport. The Stockport fans I know absolutely adored him. But yeah, Paddy Madden, and then our second goal was scored by a certain Dan Burn on loan from
Of
Newcastle.
course he was. Yeah.
Yeah, so I do remember us going. It was very un-Yeovil like. We went up. We were 2-0 up at half time in cruise control, and I was thinking, this is bizarre and bonkers. Like Yeovil, the team that I'd followed all my life, my granddad had followed. We'd been non-league football club for 108 years, a football league club then 9 years. Well, no, maybe 10, whatever. But to be on the verge of the second tier of English football, and next, Leeds were in that league.
Mm.
We played Leeds in the Championship, but still big, massive teams. QPR are in that league.
Yeah.
Um, And yeah, that second half was the worst 45 minutes arguably of my life. Just
Hmm.
watched through my fingers, couldn't believe this was going to happen. We did concede quite early on, but we held out. And you think that that's sort of like this rise and lovely fairy tale, and it's sort of. I touched on this on the podcast I did for Giant, and I'm not just plugging it. I said it in probably a
Hmm.
much more succinct and better way. But let's just say the ownership problems that were in the background of all this rise and rise, or
Yeah.
the ownership deficiency, shall we say,
Yeah.
became exacerbated at the very top level or second level of English football, and unfortunately, we fell all the way back down again. um,
Yes. It was quite a
and
rapid decline.
yeah, it was, and for various different reasons, but very much the people in charge were not the right people to have in charge, and various things like land being separated from assets and stuff like that. So it was
That
complicated.
old
That
conundrum.
old, yeah.
Mm.
So me, my dad, my granddad, there was a spell, and my brother even, we weren't going to games, as were a lot of different people. But it's
Yeah.
fair to say that there are brighter times at Yeovil at the moment, new ownership and stuff. But yes, and in fact, we were in the second tier of non-league football last year, but they won the league.
Yeah.
And we're back in the GM Vauxhall Conference or National League, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're back to being a non-league football club, and yeah, and a stable-ish non-league football club. There's a few legacy issues hanging around, but
Hmm.
yeah, it was great. It was amazing. It was a great story and a great journey, but sometimes great stories and great journeys don't end particularly well or have
Yeah.
some real down times. But again, that is also the, dare I say, the beauty of football. You have to take the rough with the smooth, and it was very rough for a week, yeah,
Yeah.
for quite some time. But yeah, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. There's some FA Cup giant killings around the corner still at the at Hewish Park, which is what the new ground's called, which was
Yeah.
obviously had no 6 foot slope. Was
No.
built to, but yeah, that's the summary of the Yeovil Town history. But yeah, the club's in a better place, and that's good because there's a lot of, well, football clubs are so important to so many people. Not just me, my granddad, my dad, and my brother.
Yeah.
It's central to a town, and it's a town in the West Country, a market town that doesn't have too much going for it.
Mm.
It's sort of out the way. The industries, the glove industry. There's no, we're called the Glovers because
Yes.
of our famous leather gloves from back in the day,
Hmm.
which the leather which also supplied for Puma King boots as well. So the
Oh,
football
okay.
link, but there are no glove makers in Yeovil anymore. Things like that. The industry is changing.
Yes.
So the football club is an important part of the town, as it should be.
Yeah. I mean, it's tied to the the community, and as you say, there's not a lot of choice because Yeovil is not in the heartland of a lot of Bristol, as you say,
No,
is
absolutely.
probably the
Plymouth, yeah,
closest to, and Plymouth and Exeter, but
Torquay, and yeah.
you're a long way from a football heartland. Going back to that playoff victory against Brentford.
Mm.
Was that the first time you've been to Wembley? Because obviously,
No, no.
you had been to Wembley a few years before that for
Yeah,
another
we had,
playoff
yeah.
fight. Were
For
you
another
there for
playoff
that
final.
one?
I was certainly. But to be honest, we kind of just forget that. We lost to Blackpool 2-0. We definitely didn't turn up that day. It was one of those ones players were overawed by the occasion. But it was also because it's fair to say we probably had our final the week before
Oh,
when we famously beat Nottingham
amazing!
Forest. As someone who was an expert on playoffs and
Yes,
comebacks, you are obviously familiar with it. Maybe some
I
of the
am.
listeners aren't, but maybe they will be because it is quite often talked about. And yeah, we obviously beat, we were 2-0 down in the first leg and we went to City Ground much more in hope than expectation, but somehow had one of the best, arguably one of the best nights of my life.
Yeah.
We beat Nottingham Forest 5-2 at the City Ground. And so we had that amazing, incredible moment. The Marcus Stewart goal is the best goal that I've ever seen
Hmm.
for a number of different reasons. But yeah, just the significance of it, the story of it all. And I've even written articles just about that goal, for example. And
Yeah.
yeah, an incredible, incredible night in an amazing historic football stadium.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
always bring it out, but the two teams that had scored more than five or more at the City Ground before that were Man United and Bayern Munich. So, you
Right.
know.
Okay. So,
So yeah, had been to Wembley before, but funnily
yeah.
enough, despite being the Man United of non-league and great in cup competitions, we'd never been to Wembley through the FA Trophy or the whatever it was
Right.
called. We'd lost a couple of times. There was countless stories, and we lost a couple of times in the semi-final.
Mm.
And it was almost like this, even as a kid, when I was a bit older, 13, 14, we kept getting knocked out in quarterfinals, usually by Kingstonian, funny enough, which
Right.
is probably the closest stadium to my house now. But, um, yeah, we hadn't been to Wembley and that was a lovely thing to go to Wembley. But then it was a lovely thing to win at Wembley.
Yeah.
It's the worst place to lose a game, but it's the
Of course.
best place to win a game as
Yeah.
someone who's someone who knows playoff finals and playoff history extremely well.
Yeah.
It's a lovely thing. And that's the thing I'll be able to talk about still, even though obviously what happened wasn't great, but
Yeah.
it was an amazing day.
Yeah. And the Forest game, I would put it in the top 10 playoff games
Mm.
ever because
No,
of
that's good.
the fact,
Mm.
and in fact,
It's still
I,
brought up, isn't it? Like obviously when
yeah,
teams are behind, I
yeah,
think was it Peterborough Sheffield Wednesday? But until
yeah,
then,
yeah.
it had been the biggest comeback, and
That's the biggest comeback in
yeah,
terms of number of goals. But I think it's, little old Yeovil,
oh
as you
yeah,
say,
yeah,
at the City Ground, which is the
yeah.
and Forest.
Oh
Actually was playing when I play regular football, sort of eight side on a Thursday night, and we
yeah,
had a Forest fan, a
yeah,
chap called Rich Harris, who
yeah,
lots of people would be spitting, going, "Oh yeah, we know Richard."
yeah,
He, after the first leg at Yeovil, when he came into the dressing room. He's one of these people who say, "Tickets, boys, tickets for the final. Everybody wants
yeah, yeah,
tickets for Wembley, tickets for Wembley." The
yeah,
sort of
yeah,
arrogance that you love having
yeah, yeah,
shoved back. He's 6'8", so he's not a man to
yeah.
argue with. But
No,
I quite enjoyed the fact that you came back, you
yeah,
beat
yeah.
them 5-2. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it doesn't
We
get better than that.
there were leaflets in car windows for buses to Wembley as we were walking up to the ground. On the way into the ground, there was
Mm.
leaflets. Someone was handing out leaflets and putting leaflets out for bus trips to Wembley.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, don't blame them. They were 2-0 up
Oh no, no.
against. I obviously karma is a bitch, but
Yeah.
that's what happens. But also not. It's not the most ridiculous thing in the world to think that they would go on to win it. But
No.
yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to know people or meet people like Nick Miller,
Hmm.
Daniel Story, Daniel
Yeah.
Taylor. Good, brilliant writers, brilliant journalists, but also Forest fans. And
Yeah.
yeah, I will obviously bring that up whenever I
Yes.
feel like it when I'm in their company or via Twitter when it is the anniversary.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I must admit, I've bumped into Nick and Dan at playoffs, and Yeovil does slip into the conversation, and Forest had a particularly bad record, and which they overcame finally. But
Exactly. Yeah.
Dan usually says to me, "Don't talk to me. I
Yeah,
really
yeah,
don't want to talk about the
yeah,
history. I
yeah,
don't want to
yeah.
go anywhere near it." But
They did win the league next season, though.
yeah.
And actually, funny enough, they played Yeovil in the last game.
Oh, did they?
And actually, to be fair to the fans, I think even they were like, "Bloody hell, you lot of," because we just went up and just one of those games that just feels like it's yours from. Even though once we scored, it felt like it was ours. It was
Yeah,
like, no, 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 there's something here. The fans are getting on the Forest players' backs, and
yeah.
it did feel like that. But yeah, but yeah, huge respect for obviously a club of that size, and just watching Yeovil Town playing a game, and then you see the Brian Clough stand,
Mm.
as we're celebrating, it's like, wow, this is football. I think the kids might say football heritage, but that was definitely football heritage for Yeovil Town fans, and it's something that we talk about much more often than we probably should. But we got to
No,
enjoy
no,
the
no,
good
no.
times.
I think you should talk about it more.
Yeah. It helps that me and my mates are on the front row and we're in all the pictures. So, little
Oh,
things
well,
like that.
that's good. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you've got
So
the
I've got a
evidence
constant,
there.
yeah, I
Yeah,
don't know why I haven't got a poster up yet.
yeah. I mean, you
Sooner.
got Oasis. We're not
Yeah,
really
yeah.
in the reunion of
No,
Oasis.
no, no,
We're
no,
interested
no,
in the fact that
no.
you were at that game at the City Ground
Yeah, exactly.
in
Yeah, yeah,
2013.
yeah.
Uh, right. So I'm going to go back to something you raised earlier. This will be our end point. Is
Nice.
you mentioned you took your daughter to
Yeah.
her first match last year. Could you just give us a
First Yeovil match. Yeah, yeah. So
first Yeovil
just
match?
to fill in a bit of background during
Yeah.
let's just say the downtime when me and Yeovil were on a little bit of a break, shall we say, due to ownership issues and
Yeah.
my stubbornness.
Yes.
Uh, I lived in London at the time, so I live
Mm.
not my closest non-league ground, and obviously Kingstonian don't play at Kingston anymore. We
No.
won't get into that.
No.
My closest ground is Hampton and Richmond across the river,
Yes. Hmm.
and I started going there just as a bit of fun, really. And they ended up being quite good, and the atmosphere was incredible. The people were amazing, and it reminded me of what non-league football was about. And when Yeovil were dealing with various modern football issues like land splits and assets
Hmm.
and revenue streams and all these business-like words, it was a real refresher and nice to return to sort of non-league roots. I ended up becoming a director at one point as well. I ended up
Oh,
being on the
right.
Supporters Trust and become a director at Hampton and Richmond. So my daughter's first game was actually at Hampton Richmond.
Okay.
But it was always in the back of my mind that I want to take her to the ground that me and my granddad and my dad and my brother used to watch being built.
Mm.
Um, Yeovil Yeovil had a succession of bad, or certainly two periods of bad ownership. But last summer they got, 18 months ago, got taken over by a local businessman. And yeah, as a result, I decided that it was probably right. And yeah, we went back to Jewish Park, and I think I left the end of that episode was like, one day maybe that was almost quite a cathartic thing doing that episode of the
Mm.
podcast because it was like telling my story, but then also like, well, hopefully one day I could take her back, and I did believe that I would. And yeah, taking her to a Yeovil game was quite an emotional moment, to be honest. We've
Yeah.
sat in the pretty much the identical row that me and my granddad, who's no longer with us, unfortunately, um, used to sit in, and it was lovely. It meant a lot to sort of, yeah, it was cathartic actually, because I
Yeah.
think, you invest so much in football clubs. We all do for different reasons and different ways and
Yeah.
manners. And ended up doing the Yeovil fanzine for 5, 6 years. I ended up doing the programs for
Hmm.
Terry Skivitt and the testimonial. I ended up doing, I did many different Yeovil things. So yeah, it did feel like it was a shame that for whatever reason, and a personal choice, I decided that I
Mm.
wasn't going to give one penny more and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it was good to go back. It felt like home because that's with the ground again,
Mm.
probably where I took my match going experience, season ticket every, going to games and then start
Yeah.
going to away games. And yeah, it was a lot, and it meant a lot. I think my daughter, she's really got into football. I mean,
Right.
we've got season tickets. I mentioned Kingstonian, but the nearest ground is Chelsea women's. So we go. We've been watching a lot of women's football. We went away to Barcelona for an away game last year,
Oh,
and
yeah.
we go to a lot of away games. So football's a
Mm.
massive part of her life. It's a massive part of my life. But yeah, like I said, it was an amazing experience to take her to a Yeovil game after, when she was 11 and she'd been to
Mm.
loads of football and different football, but
Yeah.
to take her to a Yeovil game felt special, buying her a shirt from the club shop beforehand and
Yeah.
things like that. Yeah, I don't think she's going to be a Yeovil fan, or she is a Yeovil fan, but that's fine. It was
Yeah.
just nice. It was almost, it was nice for me and nice for me to plug back in. And I've been to watch Yeovil a bit more, been to a couple of away games. And again, mates that have also made the same decision as me, not going to as
Hmm.
many games, are suddenly coming back. And it's, the people that you've made friends with and the people that you met just through a football club.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of football. Unfortunately, one of the, shall we say, more iconic Yeovil fans passed away quite suddenly recently, and I did a piece for the website called Glover's Cast, I just said, the community is the most important thing at football. The players, and I know it's a cliche, and I know it sounds tired and old school, but it's the people that you go to the match with that you have no, or some of them you might not have any connection with. You wouldn't even speak to them in the street otherwise if they weren't sat a few rows or you weren't following the same team from. And again, it's a badge of honour. Yeovil's a small place, and I might make jokes about Yeovil, and I will get the piss taken out of me on occasion for being from Yeovil and West
Mm.
Country and blah blah blah. But you are always going to be proud of your hometown, and the best way of being proud is through the football club, in my opinion, or certainly the way I've done it, and many others have done it. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's yeah, and I've really I've really enjoyed doing this actually, and finding out little things about the QPR games. I deliberately didn't want to watch it beforehand because I kind of knew I knew how the podcast went
Yeah.
as well, so I wanted to. But yeah, it's important to do stuff like this, and I think it's important for everyone to revisit their football memories sometimes
Yeah.
because we do get lost, especially in the modern age of constant noise, communication, everything. We get lost and we don't fully appreciate the essence. That's what we try and do with Mundial and various forms, whether it's video,
Mm.
podcast, magazine.
Yeah.
Football is still a beautiful game. And it is,
Yeah.
there are problems and there are issues and there are things, but let's celebrate the good stuff. Let's celebrate the
Exactly.
things that are important to
Mm.
us and to other people.
Yeah, and absolutely right. The community aspect. Let's face it, when William McGregor started, the Football League, but all those with Villa, that was the most important thing. That was at the heart
Mm,
of the community. Clearly, it has changed
mm,
massively, and so it should do. But the
mm,
important thing is the connections between the club, the fans, and in between the fans. You say you
mm,
go through these cycles. So, most clubs go through rough and smooth.
mm,
Go through the rough, you appreciate the smooth more, but when you're in the smooth period, there will be something rough around the corner. And
mm.
that gives you, it's like very cliche. It's like life, you have good bits, you have bad
Yeah,
bits,
definitely.
and you do have to appreciate that. But football does it in a nice microcosm where you can put it away. And I still get very upset if Palace lose, and I'm, far too old for that. But I actually get worse the older I get, which I know
Mm,
quite a few people have said that it's so in your psyche and in your
mm.
soul that you can't say, "Oh, it's only football." I just cannot say.
No, no, no. Yeah. That's exactly it. It's something. I mean, I mean, you're the same as well. Obviously, working in it as well.
Mm,
I'm very fortunate. I know I'm fortunate. Of course, to an extent, you make your own luck and you do your own, you follow your own path and you make the right decisions. But to be working in football, I'm so lucky for doing various things and have done various things. And this is why I get so annoyed with people or in the game that just don't seem to be enjoying being part of it.
yeah,
It's a
crazy.
privilege. It's a privilege for me for all of us to go and speak to whoever. Or I was on the phone with Lee Sharp last week for the latest
All right.
issue, for example. You know, that's so much fun. If you said to
Yeah.
me, the 10-year-old Seb, oh, you're going to interview in 30 years' time, you're going to interview who at the time was one of the most exciting young
It was.
players in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
country, wasn't he? And but just to talk about football and just talk about connection and then to talk about fans from any club or wherever. It's
Yeah.
given Mundial and I get to talk about football to so many different people, and and the benefit of it. It's a lot of fun, and I like doing things like this because, like I said, you're not just recording the memories, but you're remembering again. And you do need to remind, and I'm not just using this as a cliche to link to the podcast that I do. You do need to remind yourself why you love football.
Yeah.
You really do, because you can get dragged down, and especially with the noise and the constant news and speculation and controversy, manufactured controversy at times, and the ignorance of genuine times when clubs are in serious trouble. So, Yeovil's coverage of Yeovil was pretty much non-existent despite our best efforts. And I understand why. It's not interesting. It's not something that's easily fixable. It's a complicated situation. Let's talk about the refereeing decision at the weekend.
Yeah.
I understand. I'm not, but there are certain, I mentioned those journalists like Daniel Story and Daniel Taylor and people like that. There are journalists that keep doing that and keep highlighting the good, I've forgotten his name. The fellow at The Athletic was really good as well. Matt, I've forgotten his name. A Southend fan. Apologies. But yeah, it's
Shrimper, was it? He was known as a Shrimper.
Yes, Shrimper. Yeah. Matt Shrimper. I know him as his Twitter handle.
Yeah, exactly.
But
that's so modern now.
Yeah.
You don't know his surname. You know his Twitter handle.
It's great. It's great. And I don't want to end it on a bad note. I do think people should dig that program out. Read what the program notes say. That's amazing. That Brian Hall quote.
Yeah, exactly.
I should know that. I should remember, not necessarily remember it, but I should know of that. And it's brilliant.
Should be in a frame above your desk,
Well, I'm beginning to think there needs to be more Yeovil stuff or football stuff up here, but yeah.
But I think that's a lovely way of putting it, is that the beauty of football, you need to be reminded of it. You do it on your podcast. And I think we do it here because every guest I've had has got a genuine enthusiasm. A lot of them work in football, so commentators, ex-players, whatever it might be. But during this podcast, they actually go, oh, and it prompts them to remember things. They go, oh, I forgot. And I think where I'm going to end up here is, I don't know if you heard him, but Ali Bruce Ball did this podcast quite a few months ago now. But famously, his connection with Yeovil is that he started working for BBC Bristol. His first ever report for BBC Bristol, he was sent to Yeovil by a guy called Jeff Twentyman. Who's
one of the very best.
Yeah.
Well, not just a brilliant broadcaster, but a genuinely nice bloke. Did many things with him over the years. And I think he's got a book out. He's got a book coming out very soon, which I imagine will be extremely good, given that he's a great storyteller, but also a great person and a great foot. You hear the cliches all the time. He's a good football man, but he's definitely out there.
He's definitely along there. So he went to Yeovil. I think he said they were playing Bishop Stortford. So he was there around the mid-90s. This was his time.
Yeah.
And he remembers two things. He said Graham Roberts was your manager at the time.
Yeah. It was
frightening on the pitch.
Yeah.
Frightening off the pitch.
Yeah.
But Ali's memory of that was how he went into the report, because it was a Boxing Day match. Yeovil beat whoever it was, maybe Bishop Stortford 2-1. He started it with yo ho ho. He's sort of, oh my God, what have I done here? And he remembers it so clearly. That could have been the end of his broadcasting career.
Oh wow!
I think everyone at BBC Bristol went, good try, but let's not go down that route again, because that's not going to work. But there we are.
So that's great. I like
that. Cycle of Yeovil, and
there's a lot of
I've really again enjoyed it so much, from the streaker at your first.
I'm going to have to pick these pictures out somewhere.
You need to pick that out, and I'd love to see that. I love Brian Hall's program notes. Alex Stott, what a great man. The fact that you got Pardew in your history, and as I say, ending up with you taking your daughter to her first Yeovil game, and that for me is where football becomes, this cycle, this important thing.
Exactly. Like I said, she might not end up necessarily, but she's going to go to the club that's the closest to her. Chelsea Women's are technically the closest club, and helps it there. the best women's team, I think, because they've obviously
I
been
mean,
fun to watch. But
yeah. I
yeah,
mean, Emma Hayes has gone, but I'm sure
yeah,
they'll
yeah.
continue in their
I'm sure. Yeah, yeah. But they
memory
won
lane.
9-0 last week in the preseason friendly, so yeah, she was
Oh, okay.
happy. So yeah,
And
but
yeah.
again, the women's football does have that. Obviously, they're trying to change that. Don't get me wrong, but there is that same atmosphere and emotional connection and feel at women's football that I experienced growing up watching non-league football.
Mm.
That will change. The is professionalising a lot more, and as it should do, have more resources to be able to do that. But I would say to anyone, if you haven't been to a women's football game, then really, honestly, you should. And I think people sometimes, obviously there's more coverage of it and everything. There's a lot more of it
Mm.
all around in the media. But yeah, just just go along and give it a go. I think, and the same. I think it's a great time and it's great. It's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of joy to be had in that level of football as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll take you up on that. I'll go and see Palace ladies in the near
They're
future.
playing Chelsea on Friday night in a couple of weeks.
Oh, are they?
But yeah,
At
yeah.
Kingstonian
No,
Ground.
they're at
Oh,
Palace, but
sorry.
at Sutton. Aren't they playing at
Uh,
Sutton? Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
yeah,
Well, maybe I'll meet you and your daughter
yeah,
there. You never
yeah.
know.
Nice one. Oh,
But
pleasure, Matt.
brilliant. Thank you
Thanks.
very much for your time, Seb. It's been great. And as I say,
Really enjoyed it.
always it started with a kick. We go into the delving into the memory bank, which is fun. And I think I would end up because of the rather nefarious police
Yeah,
connections
yeah.
that
Go on.
Yeovil have. I'm going to rename this episode. It started with a nick.
Yeah, yeah. I like it. I
Got it.
like it. Yeah, I
But
like it.
yeah, been an absolute pleasure, Seb. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.